Because one of the quotes I love is be interested, not interesting. Meaning, rather than trying to show people how interesting you are, like, I can do this, this. First, be interested in them and curious. And then by nature, they'll ask, what can I do to help? Or, okay, what do you do?
Yeah. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, 100%. I was at a party recently at a friend of mine, Brandon T. Adams, picked me up. And this was to give you an example of like networking in the real world of how that manifested for me. This was about 6 months ago. Brandon picked me up. We were both invited through the CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation to a guy called Rami El-Batrawi, who's a billionaire. His house is in the Hollywood Hills. He was having about 100 people over there. So Brandon picked me up. We drove to this house, and there was a person at this party, and it was like, hey, it's great to meet you, James. And spoke about herself for about 20 minutes. I wanted to ask her questions about herself, but I couldn't get a word in because she wouldn't shut up about herself. And Brandon was standing next to me, and we both had the exact same thought of like, why would we want to have anything to do with this person who is only interested in themselves? And then, so that was a really interesting thing for me of just like, I feel that way too much of that I mentality, and I can't stand it. And that comes from insecurity. People who do that come from insecurity, maybe in a small percentage of ignorance, but above all, it's an insecurity in who they are and their place in the hierarchy of society. But there was a guy there, a guy called Dr. John Gray, who wrote books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Oh, yeah.
They've sold more than 50 million copies.
50
million, yeah. He's like one of the world's leading relationship experts. And I walked over to him afterwards and just said, look, the stuff that you have shared with us today on relationships has literally changed my life. And I don't recall being moved so much from a conversation like that ever in my entire life. I have a podcast called Win the Day. It's doing pretty well. At any stage, I would love to get you in the studio to talk more about your journey so I can share these lessons with more and more people. And he said, sounds great. And we literally, 36 hours later, we were sitting in the studio in LA, me interviewing him. Clips from that episode are massive in terms of the content that I've been able to put out there. None of the other content that I have, the Sleep Doctor is a close second, not a close second, but he's actually a distant second, but it's those two. The content from John Gray about relationships, because it's quite topical, and there are people on either side of that who want to defend and people who want to attack that. I've had videos that have posted that have got 3 million views just because I made the decision to hop in the car and go to that house and say yes to an opportunity and being open to what might happen and being interested in other people that were there. And that is what it's led to, which is then credibility for the podcast to get a bunch of other guests on. Yeah,
that's a good point. And the podcast is easy because it gives you an easy, like, okay, let's say you meet someone at an event and you want to like connect with them. What do I do? Well, invite them on the podcast. That's easy. I'll give you an example with someone we just interviewed before. He helps people with TikTok. He's really, really good at it. And when he first started, there was a musician he wanted to work with, and he basically just paid the guy to come write a rap verse on one of his songs just so he could spend more time with him. He didn't really, like, he wanted the rap obviously, but I want to spend more time with him. So he paid him to spend more time with him, and now he's his biggest client. Yeah. So it's kind of like thinking outside the box. There's no one answer we can give you that's just like, what do I say to someone? Well, I don't know, it depends. There's a million scenarios it could be. I think, as you mentioned, Dale Carnegie, be interested. Yeah. And then, as you said, you didn't pitch, hey, can you come on my podcast? You said, hey, can you come on my podcast and share your lessons with more and more people? Which, of course, he's written books, which means he wants his information out there. Yeah. So you're kind of leveraging like what he wants.
And he actually said that he's been cancelled recently. And I had spoken to him and said, we need to uncancel you from the... He didn't do anything. It's just in terms of some of the material from these books that he'd written in the 90s. There are some people sort of countering what he spoke about then. Along the line of what you said there about your friend with the TikTok stuff who's getting access to those people and paying for it to initiate the relationship, there's another very close friend of mine who's happily paid like $80,000, $100,000 to get really high profile musicians and business leaders to come and speak at his events, because that foot in the door means that relationship is solidified, and so many other great opportunities come from that. But you need to get that foot in the door, and that's how you focus on value. And if there's no other way to do it and you've got the budget for it, sometimes just paying for that to get the foot in the door. It's not my preference. I've never ever had to do that, and I may never have to do that, but I definitely would be open to it for the right situation.